As the train screeched to a stop at the platform, Janice rushed to squeeze herself onto the crowded subway car. She held her breath as the doors closed behind her, trapping her in a sea of bodies. The stench of sweat and the sound of rustling clothing filled her senses. The car was packed to capacity, and the air was thick with the heat of human bodies. Janice looked around, hoping to find a seat, but none were available. She sighed and resigned herself to standing for the duration of her ride. Janice noticed a man standing in front of her, his eyes locked on her. He wore a tattered coat and had greasy hair that hung limply over his forehead. He seemed to be muttering to himself, and Janice couldn't help but feel uneasy. She tried to move away from him, but there was nowhere to go. Suddenly, the train came to a sudden stop, and the lights flickered. The passengers looked around, confused, as the conductor's voice crackled over the intercom, informing them that there was a delay due to a signal malfunction. Janice sighed, resigned to being stuck in a sweltering subway car for an unknown amount of time. The man in front of her continued to mutter, his eyes now fixed on Janice. She could feel his gaze on her, and it made her skin crawl. She tried to ignore him, but he continued to stare. She looked away, hoping to find a distraction. That's when she saw it. A small, red stain on the man's coat. It was small, but unmistakable. Blood. Janice's heart began to race as she realized that this man might be dangerous. She looked around, trying to find an escape route, but the subway car was still packed with people. Suddenly, the lights went out, and the subway car was plunged into darkness. Screams echoed through the car as people pushed and shoved in a panic. Janice felt hands grabbing at her, pulling her in different directions. She tried to fight them off, but there were too many. As the chaos grew, Janice felt a cold hand grab her ankle, pulling her down to the ground. She screamed, trying to break free, but the hand held tight. She looked down, and in the darkness, she saw a pair of glowing eyes staring up at her. The subway ride from hell had only just begun. As the subway car came to a sudden halt, David felt his stomach drop. He had always been claustrophobic, and the thought of being trapped underground made his heart race. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He looked around at the other passengers, hoping to find someone who could calm his nerves. But all he saw were panicked faces, and he knew he was on his own. The train car was plunged into darkness, and the sound of screams echoed through the air. David felt his heart pounding in his chest as he tried to push his way through the crowd. He couldn't see anything, but he could feel the crush of bodies around him. Suddenly, he felt a hand grab his shoulder, and he spun around to face his attacker. It was a man, tall and menacing, with a cruel smile on his face. David's heart raced as he realized he was in danger. The man lunged at him, and David stumbled back, falling onto the ground. He felt hands grabbing at him, pulling him in different directions. He tried to fight back, but the hands were too strong. As the crowd grew more panicked, David felt himself being dragged away from the subway car. He tried to resist, but he was outnumbered. He could feel the rough concrete floor beneath him as he was pulled into the darkness. The group finally came to a stop, and David looked around, trying to get his bearings. He saw a small light in the distance, and he knew he had to get there. He stumbled forward, his heart racing, as he tried to make his way towards the light. But as he drew closer, he realized that it was a trap. The light was coming from a group of people, all wearing dark robes and masks. David's blood ran cold as he realized what was happening. He was trapped underground with a cult. The cult members surrounded him, chanting in a language he didn't understand. David tried to run, but he was quickly caught and restrained. As he struggled against his captors, David realized that he was going to die. Trapped underground with a cult, he had no hope of escape. But then, he heard a sound. It was faint, but it was there. The sound of a train approaching. David's heart leapt in his chest as he realized that he might have a chance. He struggled against his restraints, trying to free himself. As the train grew closer, the cult members became more agitated. They knew their time was running out. Finally, the train pulled into the station, and David saw his chance. He broke free from his restraints and ran towards the train. He could hear the cult members chasing him, but he didn't look back. He jumped onto the train just as the doors closed behind him, and he collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. David had survived the subway ride from hell, but he knew he would never forget the terror he had experienced underground. David sat on the train, his heart still pounding in his chest. He looked around at the other passengers, wondering if any of them had experienced what he had just been through. But they all seemed to be lost in their own thoughts, oblivious to the danger that lurked underground. As the train pulled into the next station, David felt a sense of relief. He knew he was safe, at least for now. But he also knew that he couldn't let his guard down. He had to be vigilant, always aware of his surroundings. He got off the train and made his way up the stairs to the street level. As he stepped outside, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. The sun was shining, and he was back in the world of the living. But his relief was short-lived. As he walked down the street, he saw a figure in the distance. It was the same man who had attacked him on the subway. David's heart raced as he realized that he was being followed. He quickened his pace, trying to lose the man in the crowded streets. But the man was persistent, and he continued to follow David, always keeping a safe distance. David knew he had to do something. He couldn't keep looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life. He had to confront the man, find out what he wanted. He turned a corner and saw the man standing in front of him. He was tall and menacing, with a cruel smile on his face. David's heart raced as he realized that he was in danger once again. But this time, he was ready. He had a plan. He stepped forward, confronting the man. "What do you want?" he demanded. The man laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the street. "You know what I want," he said. "I want you dead." David didn't flinch. "Why? What have I done to you?" The man's smile faded, and he stepped forward. "You're not the first person I've followed. You're just the one who got away." David's heart raced as he realized the man was a serial killer, preying on innocent victims in the subway tunnels. He had narrowly escaped becoming another statistic. But he wasn't going to let the man win. He lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground. They struggled for a few moments, but David was stronger. He managed to pin the man down and call the police. As the police arrived, David felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had survived the subway ride from hell, and he had managed to catch the man who had tried to kill him. But he also knew that he would never forget the terror he had experienced underground. He would always be looking over his shoulder, always aware of the danger that lurked in the shadows. Trapped underground in the subway tunnels, David had learned the true meaning of fear. And he knew that he would never be the same again.